Bloomberg Audio Studios.
Podcasts, radio, news.
On this episode of The Deal, we're bringing you an interview we recorded live at Bloomberg Power Players Summit. We sat down with Steve Pagliuca. He's the owner of the Boston Celtics and the Italian football club Atalanta. Both teams have brought home trophies in the past year, and we got to pick Steve's brain about how he builds winning franchises and the deals behind it all. Here's Steve Pagliuca. All right, let's jump right into this because one of the reasons we wanted to talk to you, Steve, is I think the technical term, Alex, is you've had a hell of a year. This has been a really good year for you.
Yeah, I'm still pinching myself.
So 2 championships. As you look back, what's the most memorable moment?
Oh, man, it's really hard. I mean, probably 2 of them were the championship game with the Celtics. You know, we came so close for so many years. I was very happy for Jason and Jalen specifically getting over the hump. So that was very emotional. And then for Atalanta, they had not won the European Championship for 100 years. So that kind of revolutionized Bergamo and the players. We had a parade there. The Celtics parade was amazing, millions of people, but the parade in Milan took 5 hours because there were so many people on the streets. They had to have 100 policemen moving people out of the way as this double-decker bus went down the hill to only go 3 miles. 5 hours. It became dark. They're lighting off flares. It looked like Apocalypse Now. So those were just memorable moments.
Remember parades?
I do. New York, not Boston, but similar. But Steve, you've had such an iconic career, and I've admired you for so long. You've been so kind to me. But thinking about your career in Bain and all the great deals you've done in private equity, but take us back to 2002, because the Boston Celtics is a little different and a lot more special in many ways. Take us back to that, and what did that mean to you at that time?
It seems like yesterday. It's interesting because I'd been at Bain Capital, and we had done billion-dollar deals and $5 billion deals, and the Celtics was a $360 million deal. And we do $1 billion deal, there might be 1 or 2 reporters. And the odd thing about the Celtics back then is there were no leaks. This was a very private deal from a private seller to a private seller. So there were 0 leaks. It's almost unheard of.
Wow.
And so it was a very hot day in September or August, whatever that day was. And we drove over to the Celtics facility. And the previous owner hadn't even told the coach that the team had been sold.
Whoa.
Wow.
And he was up in the balcony staring down at us, and it was incredible. It was so hot. I drove over with Wick Grosbeck, who's our CEO and lead partner. It was incredibly hot. He bounded out of the car, and then I was nervous, and I couldn't open the door of the car, and I was locked in the car. It was 90 degrees. I'm sweating, and we're going to the press conference. I thought there'd be a couple of reporters there, so thank God, I kind of etched on the window, help, and he came back, got me, got out of the car. I'm so glad we go and sit at a place like this, and I look up, and there's reporters, the same number about in the room today. I mean, there are 100 reporters there to report on this. And I said, okay, this is really different. The intersection of sports and business, when you put the entertainment into it, it's really different.
And so before we get to, because I know you've got some owner-to-owner questions. I do not own a professional team. I'm a humble journalist here. But I did get to know you, Steve, pre-Celtics, covering private equity. I mean, tell us a little bit about translating that work to ownership. And you stayed in private equity during all of this time, and you're still an active investor. But what was it about Bain? Because Bain was, many people in this room are very familiar with that story. A very special and different sort of partnership. What did you bring from that experience to your partnership with Wick and your other partners at the Celtics?
Both Wick and I had been in venture capital and I'd been in buyouts. And actually the concepts are very similar. So the first thing we did was do kind of a Bain study on what were kind of the key objectives that we would have going forward. But the good news is in consulting, they always boil it down to 3 things. I told Alex 15 years ago, it's always about 3 things, not 2,
That's
not
right.
1, it's 3 things. And the first was, you want to win a championship. So build a championship team. The second thing we needed to do was make it a more fan-friendly environment. Back in those days in Boston, the Celtics were the only team of the 30 teams that didn't have a dance squad or a cheerleading squad. It was really old school. And not a lot of connectivity with the fans. It was kind of like they wanted to keep the fans away from the players. So that was the second objective is really, make it a better fan experience. And the third was use it as a community asset, because you don't really, as you know, Alex, you don't really own these teams. They're kind of owned by the city, and they can do an enormous amount of good. So the first day we set up something called the Boston Celtics Shamrock Foundation. And you can't win a championship every year, but you can do a lot, for the people of Boston and New England off the court. And so those were the three pillars that we found on. And we did that study and executed on that. And the Globe came out with an article, which we just got under the wire. They said if they analyzed every team that won a championship, and I guess at that time, no new owners that came in, if they didn't win within the first 5 years, they never won.
Oh boy!
So we won in the fifth year.
Oh.
We had a 5-year plan, and we won in 2008.
Well, yeah, that's good Bain work.
So, Steve, every time, whether it was when we were trying to buy the Mets, you were always so gracious. So was Bain, and you always wanted to offer advice. You didn't have a pony in the race, but you're always such a great mentor to so many people. Every time we went to Boston, when the Timberwolves went to play you guys, you and Wick were so gracious. You made me feel so you were very hospitable and made me feel at home. You're probably the first person ever that made me feel at home in Boston, so thank you for that.
I'm a little weird.
But in all seriousness, if there was one thing that you would say with that over 20 years of experience in the NBA now with 2 championships, what's one thing Mark, Lori, my partner, and I have to do, and what's one thing we have to avoid doing?
Well, I think the number one thing you have to do is be a fan. And you played pro sports. I never played pro sports. I played in college, but I realized I played a lot of basketball, but in getting involved with the team, the team shows up every day. There's 100 games if you count the playoffs. It's amazing strain on the body. You've got back-to-backs. The fans don't understand that. They don't know that this might be a guy who's played 40 minutes the last 5 games, and that guy's got to go out there like it's the first time he went out there. It's a show every night. So I think be passionate about your players, the team, the community. That'd be number one thing to do. And then what not to do, I think the biggest problem new owners have is they want to come in and win too quickly. And we studied all the teams and drafts. We did another Bain study on drafting and all the we're very, very analytic based. We started something called the BIA, the Basketball Intelligence Agency. There's a little sign. It's like the FBI, the CIA sign, but it says BIA on it. We have a PhD from Duke. We have MIT. We have the whole crew in there. We're on our 20th kind of regression model now in terms of how do you pick players, strategy, and the rest. But I would say you need to take a long-term venture capital-like approach to it rather than turn it overnight. So you've seen many situations where you buy the team, they trade all the draft picks, bring in 1 or 2 old players that probably have something left, but maybe 1 year or 2 years left. And then if they get hurt and they don't win, you're out of draft picks, and then you're starting over again. So we always took this kind of 5-year plan approach of building by the draft, doing trades where they made sense. We didn't try to turn it around overnight.
One of the fascinating things, especially if you think about sort of the intervening years between the championships from 2008, right, to 24. It's a long time, especially in the NBA. The league has utterly transformed. What do you think is the most meaningful thing that's happened in those intervening years, other than like new owners coming in? Like, how has the business of basketball changed?
Well, if you look back 20 years ago, you would count fans in the hundreds of thousands. The Celtics didn't really have even emails with the fans. There was no Instagram. There was no Facebook. So it was very traditional. It was radio and broadcast television. So what's happened in that 20 years is media and technology has changed dramatically. You can now count fans in the billions, and the Celtics reach and the NBA reach is global. Adam Silver and David Stern did an incredible job getting out ahead of the curve. I mean, people used to criticize them for having an office in China, putting up early infrastructure in Europe. And now that's paid off big time. 30% of our players are from overseas, and they've done a phenomenal job just broadening the appeal and the product of the game. So technology and media have changed dramatically, and that has led to more abilities to monetize, players to create their own brands, more engagement on websites. And now you have a big battle between what I call old media and new media for those eyeballs. And that's why sports properties are so valuable.
You have a great passion for the game of basketball. You played at Duke for 1 year. So your
Yeah,
kid,
I was the worst player on the worst Duke team
that's
ever.
okay. You still made it. You still made it. You still made it.
It kind of like Bob Beeman's long jump. No one will ever exceed that.
Two of your kids played at Duke.
Yeah.
Okay, two of your boys. Okay. So you went
And
to
one
Duke.
at Amherst. Can't leave out Amherst.
Okay. And you went to Duke.
Yep.
You went to Harvard Business School.
Yep.
You were thinking about getting your PhD. At what point did you know that you were just built a little different?
Well, the funny story was I wasn't that strategic. The reason I didn't get the PhD is my grandfather was a shoemaker. He made $8 an hour. I had lots of student debt. I was going to be a professor at Harvard, so I went to get the doctorate, and I didn't have enough money. So I looked down the list, and what was the highest paying jobs? It was investment banking and consulting, and for a summer job.
Yeah.
So I had an offer down here and an offer in Boston. I wasn't that strategic, so I said, well, I don't have to get a new apartment. I already have my lease in Boston. So I took consulting.
Wow.
And then that turns out to be very transformational for me. So after the summer, I was going to go back and get the doctorate. And they said, we'd love you to join, this small company, Bain and Company then. And if you stay here for 3 years, we'll pay for the doctorate. So I said that, that's a great deal. I have no money. I have $100,000 in debt. I had nothing. So I took that job. And then that was about 40 years ago. And I've never really left the Bain system. And
Wow.
And Bill Bain has unfortunately passed away, but because I thought maybe I'd get my doctorate again, he would pay for it. But they probably don't have that document anywhere.
Yeah, he's like, no, but seriously, Bill promised me I could get a doctorate. What's funny is I'm sitting here, they talk about all the New York, Boston stuff. It's like, so maybe if you had taken the job in New York, everyone in here is like, wait, could they own the Knicks instead? It's like, that's a sliding doors moment if I've ever seen one. I want to talk about Atalanta a little bit because the story there is fascinating in terms of like sort of how you get there. Tell us that story of like how you get into that business of football.
Well, that goes way back again. When I got out of school, my grandfather and father said I had to major in accounting. I hated accounting, but sorry if there's accountants out there, but I didn't really like accounting. But they said it was the only people employed during the Depression. They'd both lived through the Depression. And they thought every year another depression was coming. 1929 was coming. So I said, fine. So I got the accounting degree at Duke, but then I didn't realize to get the CPA, which they wanted me to get, you had to work 3 years in accounting.
Mm.
So I had 6 or 7 offers, and I went to all those firms. I was 22, and I didn't tell them why. The reason why is I didn't really want to do accounting, but I said, anybody who sends me overseas, I'll take that job. And in those days, they would never send a 22-year-old person with no experience overseas. But one firm wanted me bad enough, Pete Mark Mitchell, KPMG today. They sent me to Holland. So I'd never been out of the country. I jumped on a plane. And in those days, this is incredible. In those days, the only sports scores you could get was International Herald Tribune 3 days later. So to figure out if who won the World Series, you'd have to get a paper that's 3 days old. But anyway, the only thing I could do is I was a sports guy, so soccer was huge, and the Dutch went to the finals in 1978. I became a big soccer fan. Fast forward 40 years later, one of my partners from Italy called and said, hey, there's a family that wants to meet you, the Percassi family in Italy, right outside of Milan, and they like some help. Maybe you buy a minority position in the team, help globalize it. So I went there, I got on a plane, I got off the plane, and I looked around, and everybody looked like me because my grandfather's from there. And I said, this is a great place. And so I really hit it off with the family, and we ended up putting a major investment in there, and they had the same goals we did. They wanted to make it bigger. They wanted to globalize. And it's been a great synergy between the Celtics and them because we've used our stat guys. We have a stat guy there now. We share marketing ideas. We share training ideas. We share player development ideas. So it's been fantastic.
So I heard this Ted Lasso comparison, which I love. Tell us a little bit about that. I mean,
it was like Ted Lasso, Italian Ted Lasso.
Yeah,
Ted Lasso.
But it really is like that. And the Italians have a fantastic culture. I hadn't spent any time growing up there. My grandparents were both from Italy. I'd never really been to Italy before, and they welcomed me there. And it's just a great culture. The food is great. The soccer is just a huge passion. Atalanta is a lot like the Celtics. They have a kind of a national brand in Italy. It's everybody's second favorite team, except if you're from Bergamo.
Right.
People love Atalanta because it's been the little team that could. It's kind of overachieved for a number of years. The Crossis have done an amazing job building one of the best academies in Europe. The reason we invested is we wanted to compete, and with that academy, you compete every year because they crank out so many good players. At one time, when we bought the team, I think they had 5 players on the under 23 national team. And that means the other 19 clubs had the other 15 players, and we had 5.
I do want to go back to that because you have such an embedded competitive advantage. Number one, 40 years at Bain, one of the best consultant private equity firms in the world. And then Boston Celtics, one of the most iconic franchises in the world, as well run as anyone. So when you take those two practices, what best practices do you take to your thesis investment and take it to Europe?
Well, I think what you take is we're trying to bring it to a more analytic approach.
Yeah.
And they're behind in soccer and that in general. And so the Percassis wanted that. They're very receptive to that. So we brought in a stats team. We just expanded that team. And Mike Zarin, who really kind of runs our whole stat operation, has come over many times. And he turns out to be a big soccer. Unfortunately, he's an Arsenal fan, but in Italy, he's an Atalanta fan. But he's come over and helped us set that up. The second thing is more global brands. So we're doing some deals with some global brands right now that we'll announce soon that are going to be very transformational for Atalanta. And then looking at fan amenities, we expanded the stadium, built new ends on both ends, and built a new club like we have here for the Celtics. That's fantastic. And I have to say the food is great at the Celtics, but the chef at our restaurant is a chef from Da Vittorio, which is the #1 rated restaurant in all of Italy. It's right in Bergamo. And so that is an incredible experience.
Yeah.
You will just come there. It takes 2 years to get a reservation at the restaurant, but you can come to our club and you get his food.
Invitation must have got lost in the mail.
Yeah, exactly. I was thinking, it's like, well,
I'm getting hungry.
I love Bloomberg and I love this Power Players event, but why aren't we taping
Exactly.
this? This is
You
a
guys are welcome
strategic error.
anytime. We open up the new stadium, actually. You're invited September 15th.
Thank you. There you go.
All right.
We asked for it.
Fuel it up. So, we heard earlier today from Tony Ressler talking about this like $3 trillion opportunity in like global sports. I mean, are you a buyer in this market? Like, do you buy into that thesis that it's that big?
Yeah, it's big and expanding. We started out talking in the beginning about the old media, new media war. That's only intensifying.
Yeah.
And I think if you look up television programs, the top 100 in the United States last year, 97 of them were sports events,
Right.
either NFL or championships or whatever. So, number one. Number two, streaming has revolutionized everything. Streaming and kind of the distribution on internet, Instagram, TikTok, etc. And so that allows fans more connectivity and more time, on those screens and eyeballs outside of the game itself, and shoulder programming, shoulder internet shows, etc. Podcasts are booming. This incredible podcast, the #1 podcast in the world. Honored to be here, by the way. And so we're at the start of, I think, kind of a revolution where it's only going to get better and better with technology. You look at this stadium that Steve Ballmer's built out there. That's going to be an incredible thing and spur other stadium development. 3D is going to come in someday, where you can be immersed in the sports event even more with round screens or big screens or glasses. So yes, I think it's a incredible product, and it is now globalized.
Yeah.
We played in Barcelona. Walk in that place, they half the people had Celtics jerseys on.
Wow.
We went to Rome. You go all over the world. You go to China in the subway in the morning. The games are on in the morning. You see them watching NBA games, especially when Yao Ming was here. But they love basketball over there. So basketball, soccer, the global sports, the global competition. I think someday you'll see teams, NBA teams in Europe. You already have NBA Africa.
Right.
These will all rise up, and you'll now have global championships of these teams.
We always, the show is called The Deal. Like, what are the deals on the horizon for you beyond basketball and football? I mean, I have to think, especially to your point, given all the success you've had in those two sports, I know you've looked at some other football clubs. Like, what strikes you as interesting out there?
Well, I think the whole business of sport is interesting. That's why this podcast is booming. There's such interest in it. And so we've looked at things as far ranging. Women's sports are going to be big. You look at the valuations out in LA, and Caitlin Clark coming into the league, getting all that interest out there. So women's soccer, that's always been a great Olympic sport. Now that's expanded. So people want to see that, and they've changed those rules to bring better players in. So I think women's sports is a big category. Just emerging sports like cricket is huge in India, and they're starting to bring that out. So we're looking at all sorts of opportunities. And then there's ancillary opportunities in terms of support for that. So I'm invested in an AI company. The AI can help sports both from a fan perspective and also from a management perspective. So I think technology, / sports, / emerging sports, women's sports, those will all be very exciting areas that right now you're scratching the surface.
Right.
One of the things about private equity, before private equity was called, the LBO business, as you've said many times, but what has been synonymous with, PE or even leveraged buyout is like you come in and you like destroy, fire everybody. And you guys have done exact opposite with the Celtics. I mean, continuity has been a real competitive advantage and arbitrage for you. Talk a little bit about why is that so important for you guys?
That's a really great question. I should have mentioned that before. That's about that long-term approach. So Bain Capital, we believe in long-term value. It's always been a misnomer in private equity, by the way. I think because the industry started out maybe in the late 60s, early 70s, there were a lot of fat companies in the U.S. that had 6 planes and restaurants and golf courses, stuff that really not appropriate for corporate America. So I think there were some early buyouts done where they would slash those things, and it got known for cost cutting. But the real successful firms, the Blackstones, the Bains, the Carlyles, they realized that if you're going to really make a profit, you've got to build businesses, and you don't build businesses by cutting. You have to grow. So Bain's always had a growth focus from day one, the consulting kind of growth focus. How can we bring these products overseas? How can we build new factories? How can we serve the customer better? And that's what's really driven our record. But part of that is long-term continuity. So back in 2007, Paul Pierce got hurt. He was our best player. We were on the rise. He got hurt. I think we lost 55 painful games. I went to all of them. It was bad. And there were people with signs. Fire Doc Rivers. Fire Danny Ainge. Fire the owners. And so we met and we said, gee, Doc's done an amazing job developing this young talent we have, and no one's going to win without Paul Pierce. And we had, I think, another good two of our best players hurt for the whole season. We had a great draft choice coming up. We loved what Doc was doing. We loved what Danny was doing. And so we made no changes. So we've a huge value to that continuity. When you bring in new people, they always have new ideas, and then a lot of new ideas don't work. But we want to stick with the guys that had good ideas that were going to work. So then the very next year, Danny made that trade, and we got Garnett, we got Ray Allen, and we won the championship after all the signs were out the whole season. Fire Doc, fire Danny, fired the owners. So that continuity for us has been huge. And most of the Celtics employees, we count their things in increments of 25 years. I mean, we've had the same. We've only had Danny, and then Brad Stevens as the GM,
right,
in all those years. And Danny retired. We wanted to go back to Utah, his home, and so we promoted Brad from the coach, and then we took a coach that was a young coach for Brad and made him the coach. So I think we only had 3 coaches in the 23 years, and we've only had and none of them fired.
That's amazing. And
we had the same Rich Gotham, the same president, Sully, the same head of marketing, Bill Reisfelder, the same CFO. So we have enormous history, trust. Back to that point of, what you need to do is you need to build A players to build an A team, and then keep them in place. And don't worry about what the media says or fire this guy, fire that guy, because they only have 10% of the data. So you got to stick to your convictions.
Well, that's unfortunately where we have to end, but a good place to end. Steve Pagliuca, thank you so much for your championship wisdom. Appreciate it. Thank you, guys.
The Deal is a production from Bloomberg Podcasts and Bloomberg Originals. The Deal is hosted by Alex Rodriguez and Jason Kelly. Our producers are Anna Mazarakis, Stacey Wong, Lizzie Phillip, and Victory Veyes. Original music and engineering by Blake Maples. Our managing editor is David E. Ravella. Our executive producers are Jason Kelly, Brendan Francis Newnham, Jordan Opplinger, Trey Shallowhorn, Kyle Kramer, Andrew Barden, Kelly LaFerriere, and Ashley Honig. Sage Bauman is our head of podcasts. Additional support from Matt Profit, Micah Rondo, Mark Dawson, Chelsea Hoon, Jennifer Yelverton, Matt Knight, Rachel Carnevale, and Elena Sausangelis. Joshua DeVoe is our director of photography. Camera operation by Tom Connors. Rubab Shakir is our creative director. Art direction is from Jacqueline Kessler. Casting by Adrian Toscano. Our associate producer is Natasha Abelard. Alex Diaconis is our video editor. Listen to The Deal on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. You can also tune in to the video companion on Bloomberg Originals and on Bloomberg TV. Thanks for listening.